was the sound and the visual change on screen when you flipped into the NVG mode.
Right.
And my game was, while I was sitting there waiting on some AI to move along its path so I could take him out from behind, was to see how many times I could turn NVG on and off because I really loved the sound of it. So yeah, hats off to Jason for compelling interface design on, I think it was called Gunsmith.
Yep, that's exactly what it was.
But unlike Ubisoft, we do not have whole teams devoted to creating an interface, and that's something they get very, very right. And one day we may have that money, and we can spend a lot of time on it. But I can promise you, when you customize weapons, you're going to get what you expect, and then you're going to be able to immediately shoot people with those guns that you have customized. So yeah, I mean, we're going to do it. Is it going to be as sexy as Jason's version? Probably not out of the box. But if that's what people want us to spend their money on, and they promise to buy like a million copies, sure, we'll do that. But functionality first, of course.
Very good. So this is an interesting question, and I completely forgot about this. It didn't dawn on me until someone mentioned this, that in SOCOM 2, with your pistol, you never ran out of ammo.
This is true. This is true, and it's not uncommon, actually.
What are your thoughts on that? Do you limit the ammo, which would be somewhat realistic, but in the qualm of keeping a game fun, you can't leave a guy defenseless. Do you plan on putting some kind of melee knife attack into the process to qualm that when you run out of ammo, you're not completely defenseless while you're looking for somebody else's gun?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I do remember that discussion when we were working on, those early SOCOMs. That was a case where fun was more important than realism. And again, if there's a huge community outcry after I say this, I'm still listening. But it makes sense to me because pistols were not, they weren't an ultimate weapon. So the balance really was never in favor of someone, unless you were playing pistols only. Then it kind of made a difference which pistol you used,
right?
In a big way, right? It was really more about, am I using the right weapon, based on my terrain in the context of combat right now, or my tactics. So I don't think it really made a huge difference, but it was really nice to be able to have, to know that, if you were out of ammo for your primary, you could, and somebody was creeping up on you, you could just pop them with a pistol, because at close ranges, it's highly effective. Regarding the knife, I'm a huge fan of that. I love the knife kill, because that's where you get to be really intimate. Bullets, not that intimate. You don't get to really appreciate the death of your opponent as much with a bullet unless you've got some sort of ludicrous kill cam action going on. And you're really going to be watching your victory dance more than any kill cam, so there's not room for both, really. The knife, aside from the sinking problems, it's a pretty good attack. It rewards you for playing tactically and stealthily in the real world. It's always preferable to make no sound and to eliminate your opponents while they're unaware. So certainly you'll see it in single player, of course. And my tendency is to want to include it in multiplayer again, but just try to make it a bit tighter than it was, all those years ago. Again, if you guys, have a hue and cry about this, I am listening, but I think we can get it right. And it adds a lot of flavor and a whole lot of blood. So,
there you go.
With that.
Real quick, I missed a question that ties in with the ghillie suit, because, of course, the ultimate counterbalance, and I'm real big on counterbalances. We deal with that when setting up the tournaments about if we ban something, are we banning something that leaves something that's off balance? The thermal scope was your balance for the ghillie suit. Is the thermal scope going to return?
Yeah, it's like you would think this game is already shipped. I
know, right?
I'm trying my best to be precise, but thermal scopes are a reality, just like NVG. Now, the way you design to support these is absolutely critical, because in some games it becomes an exploit.
Right.
I don't think a legitimate modeled on reality MVG or thermal scope is overbalancing. You really shouldn't be able to see through multiple walls and
Right.
be able to read the newspaper that the guy in the room has. And there are other ways of balancing it, like a very brief adjustment period when you switch,
Right.
and not being able to use it and move as fast or whatever, right? It's, just
Or not
you
be
have
able to use a
very,
thermal scope when it's daylight.
yeah, I mean, and it's weird. It really depends on the map. And an Arctic map and daylight is kind of irrelevant.
Oh, right.
Because the temperature differential is so extreme, and prevailing atmospheric conditions could be, really, really oppressive, right?
Right.
But in a desert, I think it kind of means less.
Right.
So everything's freaking hot, or in a steam tunnel, or in a factory, or steel mill, or glass foundry, or whatever.
Right.
And so by extension, your levels are balancers for your equipment, for your weapons. So it's like thermal's not going to help you a lot if you're in a really, really hot place. But then again, probably neither is the ghillie suit.
Good answer.
Mm-hmm.
All right, I got a quick one because this is a yes or no one. It should
Yes.
be okay. It should be a yes or no answer. Let me preface that. Should be a yes or no answer. Have you guys got PS4 dev units yet?
Nope.
There we
No,
go.
we don't.
Our shortest answer yet.
Yes, which I'm going to ruin by actually talking about that. I've said it before. The game is going to be running on PC first, and we will eventually have the build running on PlayStation 4. Talking to my friends and colleagues around the industry, they've had remarkable success and speed in getting their PC versions of their games running on PlayStation 4 hardware. It's like a whole new world,
Right.
so we don't anticipate any huge hurdles. I don't even really consider it a risk, other than the time it will take to do it. But it's not a big deal. So no, we don't have dev kits yet. Will we be asking for some? Yes. I'm not even sure if you have to pay for them anymore, but I know, typically, unless you're a big deal studio or publisher, you kind of have to beg, borrow, or pay for that kind of stuff. But if Sony's listening, and maybe some of you guys are, send us a kit. We'll start work.
Cool. Well, still a short answer. All right, let's see.
It's so sad. That was one of my. I guess it was. A short answer.
It's okay. It's okay. Nick Sutner. That's the name. Remember that name.
Okay.
We'll talk to him about getting you that dev kit. All right, so here's one of the questions from early on, and I apologize, guys, in the chat. I didn't copy names. I just started copying questions into a text file so I wouldn't lose them in the chat. When you're in first-person mode, will you be able to see the player's body, such as arms and weapons, like traditional shooters, or is it going to be like the older SOCOMs where you're just seeing iron sights and crosshairs?
Oh, well, I was just talking about the cost of implementing interface and player feedback.
Mm-hmm.
That's something that either it is or it isn't very expensive, depending on the approach you take to how you're building your character. To some extent, H-Hour, because we are primarily we're developing a full character. We have the assets
Makes sense. Right.
Right. However, when you go into first person, you start to notice imprecisions in the interrelationship between the weapon and the character's hands, for example. So what's acceptable in third person from, even 2 meters away suddenly looks ridiculously bad when it's like this and it's right up in your face. So that's a lot more work and tweaking to get that right, plus camera transitions and stuff like that. I like body awareness. I like to be able to pivot the camera down, and see that I have feet planted on the ground, and we've paid attention. So the collision mesh actually, stops my feet from going through the cement, for example. It makes you feel like you're more there. But the real reason there are 2 points of view in the game is one, third person gives you broader situational awareness. It's a game conceit, but you get more of that sense that you would get when you're actually in the field.
Right.
Right? It sort of stands in for the fact that
Your
all of
senses.
your senses
Right.
are there when you're really there. But in a game, it's you've got a camera and audio basically, and rumble, right? The other in first person is more about precision shooting and lining up the bead on your target and getting closer, right? Getting sort of being able to project you and your character's view farther out there. So as a designer, I look at it and I think, do you really need body awareness at launch if it means more clan support instead? Probably not. If a publishing partner, gives us a bunch of money and says this money goes exclusively to body awareness, then we'll say, yeah, okay, thanks. You're gonna have great body awareness, and those fingers are gonna totally, you touch the trigger, and that's awesome. But having said all the stuff I've already said tonight, I'm more about creating, what I'm talking about than getting bogged down with.
Right.
Really beautiful details that will add to the experience, but do not create the core experience.
Gotcha.
Mm-hmm.
All right, here's an off-the-wall question that I was shocked when I saw in the chat. When can we expect the H-Hour movie? I got you just as you were drinking, too. That's awesome.
Wow.
I should get I should get a trophy for that.
Well, okay. You pushed a button, and I will answer. The thing that makes these stories so compelling is not the fact that they've been mysteries, right? I mean, these are stories from fighting men who have, for their entire careers, been entirely in the shadows. Some people write memoirs, and they get those turned into movies, and sometimes there's a huge scandal and they get investigated, and then it gets ugly. The people that we collaborate with, it's a really big step for them to tell their stories to anyone who wasn't there, right? And to share these with the gaming community, and to really get to the humanity in these experiences. Someone asked me, because special forces often use the term savages to describe terrorists, insurgents, criminals, whoever they've been tasked to go after. Don't I think that's offensive? To people who aren't Caucasian, and I'm like, I explained it, right, the use of the term, and to me it's. It doesn't matter what color your skin is. If you're a bad person doing bad things, then you're bad, and that's a reason. Conversely, these guys and the stories that I'm hearing, I'm convinced that they're extraordinarily humane, and there are moments, of human contact, right, in the field that happen, and that's the kind of stuff I want to get to in the single player campaign. It's not just about shooting the bad guys, it's about seeing the other side of the story. It's about seeing through the eyes of indigenous people who are caught up in warfare that they don't want any part of, they didn't sign up for, and it's an examination of these stories through the consciences of people who have lived it and have been sent on a mission straight into danger, and are now telling us their stories, and turning it into a game of all things. Yes, we will have to change some names and details of locations, perhaps, for national security and
blah blah blah.
That blah blah blah, right? Government boilerplate, of course, because we'd never cross that line. But would it make a great movie? Yeah, I mean, it's like, of course. And the first step, have to remind everyone, first step is a demo,
Right.
and then a game, and then when millions of you guys are playing it, um, some of these stories are going to make fantastic, fantastic scripts, of course. Um, my from what little I've been able to gather so far. And these guys have been involved in pretty major hits, right? Not
Right.
hit games, but hits. The stuff we don't know is extraordinary, and it's as engaging or more so than what we've read or seen in cinematic versions.
Well, even
So
Tom was in the battle that Urgent Fury got its namesake from.
yeah,
You know.
yeah. So yeah, I think it's going to be it's a fine line to walk because we have to be very careful.
Right.
But um, I would like to see a movie about this stuff. I love movies about combat and war and that kind of thing. And for me it's personal because I'll be getting to know these guys better and better. And
Right.
I'd love to see a movie, but that's that's really putting the cart ahead of the horse. But good question.
And just to add to what you were talking about with Caucasian and not, one thing I kind of learned over the years, and especially in the Navy, is evil has no race.
Yeah, very true.
So that's the mantra
Very
I've always lived by when I was in the Navy.
Yeah, I mean I think I mentioned it somewhere at some point, but the thing we learned when we were doing research trips for SOCOM 3, I guess, people are great, right? Or they're not, and everywhere you go, there's the same jerkhole that from the neighborhood when you were growing up,
Yep.
and then there's there's Mother Teresa right there too. So.
All right, here comes an interesting question for you. Excuse me, guys. First, is the beta going to be available on PC only or PC and PS4? And how long do you anticipate the closed beta to be? And final section is, how will you choose people for it? And some of the choosing people for it is answered on Kickstarter, but I'll let you talk to that.
Yeah. Yep. Well, it's slated for as close to simultaneous beta for both platforms, or SKUs, as we say in the business. SKUs, whatever that means. No one's ever actually told me.
I could
We
go
just
look it
say
up for you,
SKU.
but it's a barcode.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, we're going to try to roll them out at about the same time. One may be slightly ahead of the other, just for purposes of managing it better. But it's on both platforms, of course. We have to. We can't not have a beta. There's certainly a closed beta, and if you go to Kickstarter, there's like a pledge tier that guarantees you'll be part of the beta, and I think it might even be the same pledge tier that gives you window into the studio, which basically gives you the phone number to the red phone, the Batman phone. And that's cool. But just based on the participation of the guys in the Kickstarter, I don't want to call it a forum. It's more like a ticker tape that's like impossible
Right.
to find stuff in, because there's posting so much stuff, good stuff, but a lot of stuff. There are people who are living on there right now and counting the seconds till we get to do this. So, we need way more people for our beta than are going to fill out the pledge tier that guarantees them the beta. So first come for our beta are going to be, the people who are active in Kickstarter and pledged in any way. And we'll make sure that the guys who pledged at the beta level get, something nice in addition. And then we'll open it up to the community, softs, SOCOM players everywhere, people who love shooters everywhere, and
Right.
aren't like known terrorists, basically. The beta potentially is open to everyone who is not a terrorist. Yeah, but it works like that, right? Some people are paying for the privilege to be guaranteed beta and get a T-shirt and a window into the studio. Other people are proving that they should be part of the beta because they're being super supportive and active.
Right.
Even going to malls and handing out flyers they made promoting H Hour
I know,
all
that's
across.
awesome. I saw that.
It's crazy. Love you guys. Um, and they're doing everything they can to make it happen. So certainly not going to forget about them. But we do need quite a few people for the beta. We'll do simulated load tests, but
Right.
nothing stands in for passionate gamers who are going to play the heck out of your game before
Um,
the rest of the public sees it.
so I've had this conversation with Harvard Bonin from Santa Monica Studios and Dylan when we were doing
I know
Starhawk.
Harvard. Yep.
You know Harvard.
Yeah, of
We
course.
made Harvard a T-shirt. I'll remind me and I'll send it to you. I'll send you a link to it. But when you talk beta, there has become two kinds of betas these days. There's a true beta where you're really testing the game, and then there's a marketing beta. Which beta is yours?
Well, I'm going to say true beta. I'm terrible at marketing, and if I could not do it at all, I wouldn't. But there's going to be demand for it, of course. What's important to me as a designer and director, and certainly sort of shouldering the, I don't want to say burden, but shouldering the responsibility for recreating the experience that we had with the early SOCOMs, but making it uniquely H Hour. I have to make sure that we have enough time for a beta, and we may get lucky, and nobody can break anything, and it plays perfectly.
And you will be
First
the first
time.
studio to do that.
Yes. Now that would be a miracle, wouldn't it? So it's my expectation that we're going to get a huge amount of useful data and feedback from the beta, and it's a real beta. It's a working man's beta. It's a beta that has meaning, and we're going to go into it with the best intentions and what we think is as good as we can make it and as solid and bulletproof as possible. Then you guys are going to get a hold of it, and we'll realize how wrong we were. We'll go back to the studio and fix as much as we can, and then we'll roll out another beta if we need to, and invite everybody back. And we'll do that as much as we can until it's really ready to ship, and then marketing can get their hands on it.
Perfect. I think we should start with H Hour a new trend and call it a Charlie. And that will be a Charlie, and that will be the marketing.
Charlie.
Yeah,
Right.
that will be the new marketing beta. So
sweet, man.
Try the game out before you play it. We'll call it the Charlie.
Yeah, it's closer than when it's ready,
right?
Which I think is the Blizzard motto, and never, which is what a lot of people do.
Right.
So yeah, sounds good to me.
All right. So this is an interesting question because we've seen it both ways. Will the game, when you get the game end of day and you put it in your system, be it PC or PS4, will you have all the guns available to you, or are you going to have to unlock it through experience? That's the first part of the question.
Okay, can I answer that now?
Okay, go ahead.
I notice a trend whenever you give me a two or multi-part question that exponentially increases the amount of time I talk. So let me answer this. The first part's easy. I'm a huge believer in day one access to all weapons.
Amen to that.
So yeah, there you go.
All right. Will the game feature a leveling system? Which I think you've already kind of alluded to this.
Yeah, of some kind. I mean, everybody talks about getting their wings, right? And we need something that that corresponds to participation and achievements and that kind of stuff. Is it true leveling? I don't know if you could call it that.
Right.
But it's it's an aesthetic thing. It's a bragging rights thing. It has power. It's tangible, right?
Right.
You want it. Does it really affect the way you play? No, it's a skill-based game.
And real quick on that, just because I'm a veteran, and with SOCOM it made sense. You used the Navy ranking system because it was a SEAL. It was for the SEALs. It was a Navy-based game. With you going the soft route and introducing all of the branches, are you going to give people the option to choose their? Everybody's on the same ranking system, but be able to choose their branch. Have you thought about that?
Kind of. I mean, we sort of use that military branding, if you will, for the Kickstarter campaign. But you'll see it's got naval and army and whatever mixed in there. The wonderful thing is that there are equivalency charts available on the internet, so
Yeah.
you can do that. It's really easy. You know, visually though, again, it's a question of how much stuff can you jam into a display,
Right.
and will it be meaningful to everybody? Because people kind of learn the naval ranks through SOCOM,
Yep.
right? I did. I was like, what the hell is that? I've never even heard that.
What's a
What
lieutenant
is that?
commander?
That's like, yeah. I mean, can you tell me? They never explained it in JAG,
Right.
I only
Oh
learned
my
what
God,
JAG was from
JAG.
the TV show.
Wow.
Yes, Catherine Bell and that guy. So, yeah, I mean, which brings me to another point. Yeah, maybe, if it makes sense. Because we want to instruct and inform while we're being entertaining, SOCOM was very sneaky about that. It was teaching me behind the scenes, and players experience what I was learning as a designer. They experienced it and learned it as players, like ballistics. You may not understand ballistics, but if you played SOCOM, you played a pretty realistic ballistics model that we sort of, punched a couple times to make more fun. Likewise, you went to crazy places and kind of heard the backstories of people. If you were playing stealthily, you were rewarded with that, and you learned about, people are the same everywhere, right? That was the message. Why not? Ranks of different flavors from different branches. We are all about honoring the contributions of men and women in the different branches of the armed forces, here and abroad. So sure. I think it's really more about the visual, though. And the tough thing is, getting enough pixels together
Right.
to have an insignia mean something on screen without being a little blue and red blob. It's a graphic design problem. But yeah, I'm amenable to that. And we don't want to exclude the Navy at the benefit of the Army, right?
Right.
So yeah.
And ironically, one of our staff, we have a couple of staff members that are active duty Coast Guard, and Sierra just actually went into the he just got transferred to Virginia for the Special Forces for the Coast Guard.
Oh, congratulations!
Didn't even know they had a Special Forces in the Coast Guard. I mean, I guess they
no.
get faster boats.
Yeah, it does. They hit like stealth-capable boats. That's amazing. See, wow. Okay, well, I learned.
I give them a hard time. Being Navy, we always gave the Coast Guard a hard time. All right, so here's the last part of that question was whether or not all the attachments would be available from the beginning, but I think you answered that with everything's going to be available when you turn the game on the first time.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, that just seems like,
Logical.
for the first couple of weeks, people are going to spend a lot of time figuring out what works best for them. And, if it's not all there, I mean, yes, later there's going to be more weapons and attachments through DLC or paired with DLC releases.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, out of the box for sure.
So this is more of a specific question about weapons, which I don't think you have an idea of how many guns you're going to have yet. But is there going to be a high-powered bolt-action sniper rifle with a one-shot kill?
Oh. You mean like a Barrett? Yeah. Well, I love big guns.
That's what she said.
So, yeah, I know. You get it all the time, right? Yeah, I think so. I mean, those things have a real use. I mean, I think most people do know, although it hasn't been popularized in games because it was often impractical. You didn't have crazy long draw distances until fairly recently. So,
right.
The real application of 50 cal sniper rifles is anti-vehicle, right? You could shoot people, like a mile away, but really they're more about stopping, engines and heavy, like penetrating walls to get to the target and stuff. Material penetration is sort of a sketchy science until fairly recently. It was, not particularly calculation intensive, but sort of mouse click intensive to set that stuff up. And sniper rifles, like 50 cal sniper rifles, certainly have their application. And I think I've said online a couple times, one of the things that is going to be different, and I don't want it to affect the way the game feels too much, is draw distance limitations. In SOCOM, If you watch the whole movie, Russ and I are making fun of it. The draw distance in the early SOCOMs was like, 10 meters or something crazy. In SOCOM 2, we got another couple meters out of it. We don't have that problem with H-hour, but the potential danger is, being able to see forever and reach out and touch someone at those ranges could change the nature of the game. So we have to be careful about making sure that we still design the map very carefully and use atmospherics like smoke and fog and
Right.
well-placed obstacles to not overpower in favor of the sniper, but still be fair.
Good answer. I'm sitting here looking for some new questions. Okay, so this is an interesting one, and probably because I don't have any clue what this is, so you guys can call me crazy in the chat all you want. Will we be able to ninja jump?
Is that jump to grab or grab to jump or
I have
jump
no
to climb?
clue.
Jump to climb. I bet it's jump to climb. And everybody's like stomping their feet everywhere. That is a community resolution issue.
Copy that.
Yeah, I like it, but I like jump to climb. It makes sense to me because that's the way the body works. But if people have really good arguments, I'm listening.
So here's an interesting one, and this kind of has already been answered by PS4. And I'm going to tie something else I just saw into the chat to this, but will there be a way to review gameplay footage, maybe with clanmates to go over tactics, or just uploading cool, awesome clutches? Well, we know in PS4 that's already built into the system. Are you going to provide that on? Are you going to build something towards that for PC? I guess would be a better question.
Yeah, bearing in mind that we want a simultaneous release for both SKUs of the game, doing that for the PC when it already exists on PlayStation 4 might not be the best investment of development money. Is it cool? Kind of, yeah. I think what's really cool is what people do with this stuff after it spits it out in a raw form. But do you take it into Movie Maker or Premiere and do something crazy mashup with it?
My recommendation would be to partner up with one of the streaming software companies and say, hey, because they can partner with you guys and give the guy the apps. And I'm a big proprietor in the IT world. If somebody else has built it, they can get a license for it and use it.
Yes, absolutely. I love that. And and if people want to do it, send me a mail. But I think it's cool, but it's way less important than getting the gameplay right, and the clan and the community support, and stopping cheaters. It's a lot to take on. So that may be one of those things that PS4 players get first because it's already
it's already there.
Yeah.
Okay, so here's an interesting question, and it's going to spawn into another question. We're getting a lot of that now that the chat's really been going. The guys are getting really good with their questions. Will we have a map? I'm going to quote this question. Will we have the map that is famously used for the Diebreaker map in clan battles, like Crossroads?
Are you asking, is Crossroads coming, or is there a tiebreaker map?
Yeah, I don't think they're. I think they understand we can't use Crossroads and Fishhook, and because those are assets of SCEA.
Yeah.
But I think it's an interesting question. Will we have? I guess a Crossroads was that balanced map that you could use for a tiebreaker.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, certainly, I'm a fan of the tiebreaker. And we have to have maps that, are ideal for that particular moment. And it's great to get this from the community at large, but, through, I know people like Luke and Turbin and Justin are going to constantly harp on this stuff. So, yeah, I mean, it's, of course.
So, and let's kind of go into the maps, and your philosophy on maps are built around modes.
Mm-hmm.
And I have you alluded to a number of maps that your goal is, and mode-wise, obviously, the demolition was a major mode, a major player in the modes. What modes are you gearing towards, and are there modes that you're going to new modes. You don't have to tell us what the modes
Yeah.
are, but are you planning on some new modes that we've never seen before?
Yes. Yes to all that. Um, yeah, there are going to be some new modes, but all the classic stuff that people really love, it's coming back. The names will change,
Obviously.
but the approach is quite similar. Um, I'm pretty confident the tactics you use successfully to complete games using those modes, or matches rather, is they're going to work again for you. Excuse me. Now, in terms of maps, what we've committed to is 6 great maps for the very first release. And then in about 3 months, we're going to release the first DLC that has a bunch more maps. And I think at least one more game mode. Several game modes ship with the game at launch,
Right.
again to be expanded. Again, the designer in me wants to do new stuff, but the realist in me knows that getting these things right and making maps that are perfect, right, for a single game mode is enough of a challenge for launching this thing. And my philosophy about a map being designed for a particular mode is, it's pretty straightforward. If you want to design an escort type map, design it for escort. You're
Right.
not designing it for demolition, and you're not designing it for deathmatch necessarily. But then when you're done, testing is going to reveal
What maps can use more
what
modes?
maps can use more modes.
Gotcha.
And a good designer is going to create an escort map that works pretty darn well just in pure deathmatch. And maybe with a little modification, it would work pretty well for demolition. So, why not? But my philosophy is we better have one damn really perfect map for each mode, and that's it. And,
Love it.
I don't want people to get bent out of shape because you're going to be able to play all kinds of stuff on it. But there may be one mode that just is terrible on that map, and I don't
Right.
want anyone complaining, oh, David, you're awful because you shipped this, and I can play this horrible mode on this map that's so awesome for escort. And that's all I'm saying about that. It's just like, if it's terrible, I'm going to try to protect you from it. Show you
Nice.
only the goodness. Yeah.
Nice. Okay, so this is a probably a yes or no question, maybe. Have you set yourself a goal for frames per second?
Oh, lots and lots of frames per second.
Would that be a 60? Since I think that's kind of what this gen's hardware is shooting for, is 60 frames.
60 is cost of entry. 60 was the bane of our existence when we were on Xbox and 360 and PlayStation 3. It's kind of a non-issue for a high-end PC,
Right.
but we are trying to make sure that people, everyone can at least run it, with a machine that can handle 30, right?
Right.
You want more, but we want to make sure PC players can scale down to 30 and it's not going to tear and be super choppy and all this stuff. I think what's really cool though, frame rate aside, 60 is awesome for a shooter. I mean, it's great. It puts you in the sweet spot. However, what I've learned over the years is it's not the frame rate, it's the controller code, and it's the nature of the hardware of the controller that you're using.
Mhm.
So if the controller has slack and lag and has an unforgiving dead zone and
Right.
it just doesn't fit your hand, it doesn't matter what the frame rate is. It's like the controller and the code that talks to the controller and your console or your PC. That's the most important aspect. If you don't get that right, it doesn't matter how fast your game runs. It's like it feels
pointless.
terrible.
Right.
It's pointless.
That's interesting. I've never heard anybody explain that.
Well, hey, I am an honest game developer, and I will tell people just about anything they ask. In fact, I can't be stopped at this point.
As a character
So, yeah.
comes and tackles you out of the throne.
And
And interestingly enough, I got to play on the PS4 controller last week, playing Black Light Retribution, and it seems like they've definitely scaled down the lag a lot, and they've talked about how they really had worked towards getting that lag issue qualmed with the DualShock 4. So hopefully we'll see that.
Yeah, people will figure it out over time, but yeah, we're going into it sort of forewarned, I guess.
Right. So another interesting question about another platform is, do you think HR will make a presence ever to the Vita?
Oh yes, I've seen this question. Maybe, I was contacted. Shout out to Cobra Studios, who are working on a pretty cool Ouya project right now. I think that on different consoles of any size, whether it's handheld or an alternative to the Vita or whatever, I think it's really obvious that you can make a pretty good experience happen on those. Is it on my short list of things to do? No, it falls somewhere well below Revenge for its certain topic. But it's possible. I mean, if someone comes to us and says, "Well, we really want you to port this,"
right?
Yeah, why not? But I think it's a good question. But as time goes by, more and more people are going to migrate to the new consoles and higher-end PCs.
It's interesting that PS4. I guess one of the untold expectations is with the way the Vita's integrated, that you'll be able to pause the game and pick it up on your Vita so your wife can watch the TV, kind of thing. So I think that may happen before you actually see a Vita-centric version of HR.
Yeah, quite possibly.
Okay, so here we're going back to maps again.
Boy.
Yeah, well, and maps are going to be the biggest discussion point. What are your approaches to making night maps?
Maps?
Yeah, for HR.
Wow, this is a dangerous question.
Do I need to get comfortable?
Yeah, the thing about night in games is it's simulated, because you still, you have to basically...
You got to be able to see on your screen.
Approximate what the human eye will be able to perceive on a starry night or a moonlit night or an overcast night with streetlights or whatever. But the trick is you have to remember there's no true black, because first of all it always bans and looks horrible.
Right.
But if you can disappear completely, your map is broken. So my approach is night is it's most effectively used by players who are also have a keen sense of using camouflage, right? It's staying motionless in shadow. It's not that the shadow makes you invisible, but it tends to make other players not see you because you're not moving. Human eye is, after how many, I don't know, 3 months of evolution. Human eye is better at, and the brain is better at detecting motion than it is differentiating patterns. It's better at differentiating patterns than it is seeing contrast and blah blah, on and on and on, right? So players that are aware of these things are going to be able to use shadow and dark areas and camouflage to their advantage in any map, whether it's night or not. Of course, those sorts of maps are going to be, they're good in the sense that you can essentially change the lighting scheme, playtest the heck out of it, and if it works, you've got a whole other map, really, because by making a map that was noon into midnight, the experience is going to be very different.
Right.
It's definitely going to drive your choice of equipment and attachments. And I've said somewhere that lights are interactive, and you'll be able to modify the sort of the light levels that way.
So we can shoot light bulbs again.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah,
I missed that.
I can't believe we did that on PS2, but
that was awesome.
You'll be able to do that again. So sure, it doesn't make sense to not do night maps, particularly when we can, in some ways, just by changing the lighting scheme, we can give you a whole other map,
right?
Essentially, for not that much more cost.
Antonora, love it. Okay, so this is a question that I think comes into development costs. Is there going to be a editor available to the community?
Oh,
You don't see
yes
that
and
much
no.
anymore.
No, no, and there's standouts, right? Like the Cry engine, for
Hmm.
example. Great, you can put together a map really fast, and very easily. The thing about map editors is it, very quickly makes you realize that you're either very very good at making maps, or you really shouldn't be bothering. And the thing about being good at making maps is if you're good at making maps, um, why don't you work in a game engine editor and put together a portfolio and come work for us? I'd love to be able to give you a map editor, but it's kind of already built into to most engines now.
Right.
Are we going to preclude you from making your own maps and using those over a LAN? No, not at all. Is it an area of emphasis for us? No, because we've got bigger fish to fry, right? Just keeping everybody happy with core gameplay and the community stuff and the clan stuff. That's a big deal. It's a lot. So yeah, people are going to be able to make their own maps. Will we host them on our servers? Probably not. Right? Certainly not
Gotcha.
right away. Mm-hmm.
Okay, and it's interesting that you mentioned that because, and I did take the minute to actually copy this username. Bodybag1
Mm-hmm.
put in there. I've been working on some map designs for the next SOCOM game. Started about 2 years ago. My intention was to try and submit them as ideas. How do I contact you? How can I get them to you?
Well, it's really easy. I sort of sporadically write a blog on the SOF Studios site. If you go there, I think my email is posted. So that's the easiest way. Send me an email.
The other thing I'll say is, Justin, since you're in the chat, if you want to find Bodybag1 in the viewer list and send him a message via Twitch, you might want to reach out to him. But it was interesting that you said that and he had asked that question.
Well, that's awesome. You know what? The thing, I was fortunate enough to be an instructor, a design instructor, for a couple of years, and while I kept my day job designing and directing. But it's one of the most rewarding things about having done this a while is finding that spark of genius in a young person who just really wants to make games, and then being able to help them do that. We've set aside a fair number of slots. I keep making a big deal out of, how the team is all-star and we've all worked together for 10 years or whatever, and everybody has 10 years of experience. But I think Will Wright very famously and correctly said, that's not the ideal team. The ideal team is, it's those all-stars, and then it's some sort of people who've been around 5 years, and then it's like the new guys who make up for experience with enthusiasm and raw talent, and it becomes a job of everyone else on the team to sort of mentor them into being our replacements, because we're not going to make these things forever, and we don't want to leave a legacy of having sort of kept all of our secrets to ourselves and retired to write memoirs that may or may not reveal secrets. So yeah, send me stuff. And I have to say, this Kickstarter campaign is bringing the talent out of the woodwork.
Right.
Behind the scenes, I've been contacted by talented graphic designers, motion graphic designers, audio engineers, composers, level designers, artists, programmers, mobile developers. And as soon as it's absurd really how much talent is like knocking. And as soon as the Kickstarter campaign is over, I'll be reaching out to these guys and seeing how we can collaborate in the future.
So continue on with maps.
It's map hour.
Yeah, it's map hour. Here
It's
we
not
go.
H hour. It's map hour.
Will there be dynamic maps? And can you briefly, I like how you put that briefly, explain your team's map design philosophy?
Oh, okay. Well, we've become very familiar very quickly, haven't we?
Yes, we have.
Wow. Okay. And then, deceptively complex.
I know.
I mean, deceptively innocent question that is deeply complex. Dynamic maps, as in stuff blows up and the terrain changes in some significant way.
Right.
Yes. However, there's a ton of potential exploits, and syncing that data across all players to all consoles or PCs becomes problematic due to lag, which can lead to an unfair advantage for people who experience the event first.
Right.
Or show up after it's happened, except it's still happening for some people.
Right.
And that's bad. So we have to be super, super careful about those things. Anything that does not really affect gameplay, like chipping or wear, abrasion, stuff like that, that doesn't give you any kind of clue about player, it doesn't blow your stealth or your cover or whatever. Yeah, we can do that because it can be synced in the background. It doesn't really matter so much. But yeah, to some degree, I mean, we always did love blowing up stuff and changing the nature of the map. So yes, we're going to pursue it. What is our design philosophy about maps? Map design? I think that was a question.
Yes.
Well, my philosophy is, it's a broad philosophy. And it includes truisms such as pay attention to architecture. It's like all buildings could be built in the real world. They should not, if they wouldn't stand in the real world, don't build them in your game.
Right.
Make sure the scale is appropriate, right? Doorways have to be a little bigger because it's a game, but try not to have anything that seems ridiculously big or ridiculously tiny. Always go to the source. It's like internet research is okay, but look for the fresh and the original, the never before seen. In order
Right.
to do this, you have to actually become indigenous for a while. We have a new resource that I didn't have when I was researching SOCOM, which is sort of like the personal photo albums of people who have been to these places
Right.
all
Right.
over the world. But there's no substitute for actually going there and figuring it out yourself, because once you start meeting people and they start giving you tours of their homes and the caves where they smoke hash, and that kind of thing, you don't know how people live, and you don't
Right.
really understand the way their cities work or how their farms work or what it's like to really be there. So go to the source. Adhere to map design principles that work for all good shooters. There are only a finite number of map design archetypes. Follow those. Add your own flavor and your philosophy to that. But maps are favorite maps for a reason.
Right.
When you look at them from a satellite view, and you'll start to see the same sorts of patterns emerge. The cosmetics may change. You can change the terrain in different ways, maybe. The game modes may change, but there are map archetypes.
Right.
The over/under, the asymmetrical L, the the Mobius strip, whatever you want to call them. Them, whether you have
Right.
names for them or not. So my philosophy is design from the source, heed the archetypes and what's worked well before, and then test the living hell out of it. Do speed tests. Do not leave anything to chance.
Gotcha.
Yep.
All right, so this has been asked by Interdub and a couple other people, and shout out to Interdub, former staff member at Urgent Fury, doing Happy Thumbs Gaming now. Will there be custom taunts? And can there be more than just text? Can there be audio taunts added that are customized?
Potentially yes to the audio. I think that's awesome. I'm pretty sure it was me and the taunting, right? That was my idea. Any way you can insult people in a friendly and welcoming way, I'm all for it. So yes, customizable taunts. It wouldn't be this kind of game without that kind of thing. But I think even more important is customizable victory dances.
Let me get on my soapbox. One of the things that Urgent Fury stands for is win with honor, lose with dignity, and one of our rules, and it's still in the rules even though there's not any games that we use anymore right now, but we don't allow taunting and dancing on bodies in a tournament match because we look at it as bad sportsmanship.
And it kind of is.
So
I do not disagree.
so with that in mind, would you be willing to to add a server function to turn off taunts and dancing?
Yeah. Um, yeah, I do believe I keep saying it, but if you want to create a very straight-laced, hardcore experience at one end of the spectrum with this game, we'll give you the tools and options to do that.
Very good.
If you want a more cavalier, I'm going to teabag you and, break dance on your corpse version, why
Gangnam
not?
Style.
And believe me, it's like potentially this could be the Space Channel 5 of shooters.
I would like to see all the players do a line dance.
Yeah, I love that. There's still YouTube videos of that stuff, and it just makes me giggle every time. So again, it's your choice. We're going to expose all those parameters to you, so
Love it.
You do what you want with it.
All right, so this is a very adamant question in the chat. Is there going to be, and this is multifaceted, and this one I want to do all.
And we're
all
down
of
to the last 5 minutes, so
yeah.
you're taking a risk here.
Well, it's
Hanger.
I've got one last question that I'm saving for the very end, which is very key to the whole Kickstarter thing. But is there going to be an option to vote players out? And
yes.
But one of the exploits was people, when they're dead, would use voting to tip them off. So is there a way to allow voting but not use that as a cue?
Wow, you're asking me to design during TV time. I suspect there is. It doesn't occur to me immediately, but yeah, and this is awesome. See, this is one of those things that we should address. We don't want to create. We're not creating an emulator running original code and content. What we're doing is, being inspired by the experience of SOCOM 1 and 2, taking the same design approach and then making it into what we want today, right?
Right.
What a great question, not because I have an answer right now, but because you've made me
aware.
You put that right here, and so now we can address it. So.
All right.
Really good.
Okay, another hot topic right now that keeps getting put into the chat is based on the side switching poll. Have you changed your mind about the side switching since it's showing 85% of the community is against auto side switching during rounds?
You mean forced side switching?
Right.
Oh yeah, that wasn't a kind of crude attempt to balance. I don't even know if I've answered this question in public. I might have been talking about something else, and people were asking me one question, and I was giving an answer to another question. It is my intention that you can play either side, right? I want to be clear about that.
Right.
So if you want to play terrorist, you can play terrorist, and if you want to play SOFs, you can play SOFs. It should be your option to switch sides before you launch the match, right?
Right.
Because everybody just wants to play, and if you're not playing, you're not playing with a team, and it's just kind of a pickup game. Why not? That forced switching, I don't know if I've talked about this because it kind of leaves a bitter taste in my mouth when I say it. So I think I'm in agreement with the Vox Populi. So yeah.
Interesting.
Why?
Now we use in the designing of the TAC map tournaments, we use side switching off because we design the territories on the defending team defending and the attacking team attacking. Mm-hmm. So obviously it goes back to the parameters will be there for us to do what we want with the game.
Yeah.
I got a couple more questions. One of them being the very last one. This is a good question because we've all felt this. How closely will the communication continue post-launch, or are we going to be left high and dry? And past SOCOMs, where I can almost answer this that you're not going anywhere post-launch. But I'll let you address the community's feeling that they're not going to get abandoned when the game launches.
Okay, well, I'll answer the last part first, and unequivocally. the last time I left a franchise, I think I sort of created a personal, customized hell for me that is waiting on me unless I, make H-hour everything that I've been talking about and the things that everyone has been saying they want to see in this kind of game. I'm a big believer in karma and a cruel and capricious universe that I am trying to outsmart. And by doing this and refusing to ever walk away from a franchise that I love and fans that I really love, I think I'm going to avoid that personal hell that I have created for myself. So I'm not going anywhere. And then in terms of the constant communication with the community, well, obviously I can't spend as much time as I am right now because this is my full-time job.
Right.
Being fully engaged. I have to be a little bit more regimented and moderated that way. So that's why people will get invitations. It's like, okay, we're going to have a structured discussion for the next week about this. Here's the design. We need you to participate. You can send in by email or you can participate live from blah, 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 like we're doing now, right?
Right.
But the reality is, if I really continue the amount of engagement I'm doing right now, I'm sleeping less than 4 hours a night, and I'm working 7 days a week, which leaves, and please ask me how much of the game I have designed or created while I'm doing this, and that would be, zero. So I don't think anybody wants that. But the balance has to be, as I promised. We've got figures that have a certain amount of notoriety, like Luke and Turban, and all kinds of supporters at all different levels, and then the whole community who have access through us through our forum on the SOF site. The guys who pledge at a pretty high level on Kickstarter get window into the studio and the private forums, and sort of access to the red phone. So and from sort of a personal perspective, I think I described it as walking into the heart of a nuclear furnace. Being
Yep.
totally transparent, which is not something I could ever do at a major publisher. It's been unnerving and slightly terrifying, but extraordinarily rewarding at the same time. People are throwing ideas at me constantly and asking really good questions, and it's not entirely true that I haven't been getting to do game design, because the more people talk to me, the clearer, some of the gray areas are becoming, and it's already happening. So yeah, I mean, as much as I can be, I hope that people understand, I can't do this 20 hours a day every day.
Well, I assume that in the plans will be a community management team.
Yeah.
That's the standard nowadays, which is kind of what I've become even at Urgent Fury.
Yeah, for sure, and that's cool. But I don't want people to think that I'm not listening or participating. Right. Clan management, community management, which is related. The guys that do the community management, that's awesome, but they are also a layer between you, the game designer, and I think I said this at the beginning of the show, maybe, or it was another interview. Every game designer should be talking to people that are playing or will be playing his game.
I agree.
And in the early days, 8-bit days, it was like, yeah, whatever. You're just gonna pirate it anyway, so let's talk about it before I ship it. But it's not now. We can listen, but we can't participate, and I think that's not the best approach. So going indie lets me be as engaged as I have, time for.
Right.
And I don't want people to think that, I'm not going to be available. I will be as much as I can be. And I tend to, I kind of don't have a life, so I'm consumed by whatever project I'm working on, and I tend to respond personally as much as possible. Because celebrity types, I'm not saying I'm a celebrity, but celebrity types I've contacted before have been surprisingly generous with their time. Quick story before we wrap up. I was in college, and I just finished reading The Vampire Lestat, right?
Okay.
And he's like, wow, what a super sexy rock and roll book. I love it. I'm going to call Anne Rice. And I did. I called Anne Rice. I looked up her husband's name. Her number was listed in San Francisco. And I called, and Anne Rice picked up the phone. And then Anne Rice proceeded to ask me what I thought about Interview with a Vampire and Vampire Lestat, and what I thought about, why characters did what they did, and did I believe in the vampire mythos, and how she treated it, and wouldn't give me details about what she was working on. It was Queen of the Damned, but Anne took like half an hour out of her day, and that for me was a defining moment. It was someone who is making this stuff that I love, that entertains me and transported me from, our world into something very different, was willing to spend a chunk of her day just talking to me. And I don't know if she got anything out of it or not, but I sure did. And I want to pay it forward to everybody who has been so kind and generous to buy my games before, the games my friends work on, and who are supporting the games industry at large. So if you love this kind of game and you're supporting it, I'll be your Anne Rice.
Fantastic. I've got the last question, and this is probably by far the most important question of the night.
Oh, God.
What happens?
No time.
Are you ready? What happens if we don't meet the goal? Can you, and this is more as a general, so people understand how Kickstarter works. What happens if you don't meet the goal on Kickstarter? Are you able to extend the timeline, or is H-Hour going to die?
Wow, how binary. Life's not really like that. Of course, you don't lose any money on Kickstarter if the project isn't funded. What you've made is a pledge. It's just like any telethon in its way. You're only charged when the campaign closes successfully. So if you've pledged X amount and the campaign is unsuccessful, then you won't be out any money at all. So there's really no risk there. I'm beginning to believe fairly confidently that the campaign will be successful, because the numbers keep going up, and
right.
We're finally getting press because it's not E3.
No
Great. Yeah, everybody I know has yelled at me about that. So sorry. Wow. But if the campaign is unsuccessful, and I really don't think it will be unsuccessful, because people are they're going viral with it.
Right.
It's starting to become a little bit of a phenomenon. And the thing about phenomena, whether they're UFO sightings or chupacabra outbreaks, they tend to spread all over the place. Right now, there are clans around the world who are pooling their money for big pledges. There are people who are waiting to, make a showy entrance. There are tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of fans of, the early SOCOM games who still don't even know that we're running a Kickstarter campaign to make the spiritual successor to SOCOM. And as more and more people evangelize it, and we've crossed the sort of magic threshold of over 1,000 backers, the potential pledge growth could be exponential. So I doubt seriously that we're going to fail. Too many people care too passionately, and as I said earlier, it's gone from a mission to an epic quest, and all epic quests return home with the world fundamentally changed forever, and that's how we're going to do it. It's not just me; it's all those heroes who, are pushing to make this happen and coming on this quest with us. Now, if the epic quest fails, are we done? No. It just means that, I don't know when we're going to be able to get that demo together. People have been very generous contributing time to create assets, but, they have day jobs. So I don't know how long it'll take. I'm not entirely willing to give up. But I believe that people who really loved what we did with the early SOCOMs will come back to it, and they'll help us make it real. VCs and publishers are just waiting to see a very pretty demo that recreates the magic of those early games. And there are a lot of people waiting to talk to us when we have that show. So for the risk of all of $10, if what if a few thousand people
Right.
kick in, we're going to get over the finish line and be able to make this happen.
Well, David, I appreciate you taking out a good portion of Saturday evening to sit here with me and talk about H-Hour in this open forum format. If we missed your question in the chat, I do apologize. We are out of time. I tried to get as many of them as possible. But you have the ability to go right over to the SOF Studios site and put those questions out for David and the team to answer. And we've been putting in the link in the chat, as well as we have a link underneath the window if you're using the full screen version, not the old version of Twitch, where you can click on that link and go right into putting in your pledge. We recommend that everybody, no matter how large or small your pledge is, it doesn't need to be any smaller than $50, and it can be as much as $4 million as long as you hit that $50 pledge for PS4 until we run out of those. Then after that, pledge to whatever your heart's desire. We've got less than 15 days left. We're halfway through. We've got about, what would you say, a little over a third of the way there, roughly? Let's see where we're at right now since we started the interview. Or I guess not really interview because we've been here, some more open forum. So we're at 83,684. So we've gained some during the during the show.
Good. Thank you, guys.
We got 1,056 backers and 3,883 comments. Lord have mercy.
Let's make those a little more equitable, guys. Come on.
So you guys get over there to that and make your pledge. Like I said, $50 minimum is the expectation from Urgent Fury going out to the community to get this on PS4. I can already tell you guys you're going to love the PS4 controller, so there's no reason why not to play a spiritual successor to SOCOM on the latest and greatest next-gen hardware coming out this fall. The game's not going to come out this fall, and of course we are also giving away, when everything's said and done, with the PS4 that we're going to give away, you will get a copy of HR when it's good and damn well ready, as the Harvard Bonin would say.
Harvard.
So, David, once again, I thank you very much for having us here. Shout out to Justin, to Tom, to Dan, everybody at SOF Studios, and of course all of the partners that work with us, with the community partners, Frag Nation, Happy Thumbs Gaming, Battle Chatter Online, Off Duty Gamers, all of that slew. I don't have the list in front of me. David, you're more than welcome to close out, and we'll end it for the evening.
Okay. Thank you, everyone who has watched tonight and asked questions, and who have been active on the Kickstarter site and on the SOF site. Keep telling your friends. We really appreciate it, and we're really looking forward to bringing this to a successful close, so I can do what I'm really good at, which isn't promoting things. It's making games. So thank you for giving me the chance to do that again. That's it.
Absolutely, and I did forget the real SOCOM. How could I forget Luke in the gang?
Yeah, I wonder how you did that.
I've slept on Luke's couch.
It's weird how everybody sort of knows each other.
Oh,
or
yeah,
feels like they know each other. It's
best statement in the chat just now. If we don't make it, what we will learn is one thing is the SOCOM community is one hell of a broke community.
Yeah, I mean, if it doesn't happen, then I guess that maybe the gates of my personal hell will close.
No, we know what's going to happen, and what that is going to do is, I don't know if making your life even a more living hell, or I don't know if that's what's going to happen, because I know you love to do this. I mean, this is your passion.
Yeah, for sure. Well, it's going to be fantastic when we do it. So, yeah, I could do this all night, except I can't.
I know, right?
Okay, thank you so much for having me. We all appreciate it.
No problem. I'm gonna mute you and close out the feed here.